Hi everyone. So today is going to be a very important topic which will help the beginners or the cloud enthusiast who wants to step into the cloud journey and understand the fundamentals. To begin understanding cloud, we would have to go back to understanding why cloud came. If we already had a traditional IT data centers, what problem did it solve? Right? So this video is going to be about understanding what cloud computing is, why companies are moving to the cloud, and the basic concepts every beginner should know. If you're starting a cloud journey, this video will give you a very strong foundation. So what is cloud computing? So cloud computing is the delivery of IT resources over the internet. In layman, that means we can use the computer resources through the internet instead of keeping them on your own computer or office. So when we say cloud computing is not like we are doing the compute on the cloud, but basically we are going to do the computing. With the computing comes the servers, the large hardwares, and the storage devices, the databases we normally have on our traditional IT infrastructure. And with the cloud, that means basically we can access them, all these servers, databases, our storage devices, and a lot more over the internet. Just means we just have to go to the internet, log into our browser, and we can directly access them. And the more advantage is we can access them anytime from anywhere, and we only pay for what we use. In simple terms, you can think like a cloud is like renting the IT infrastructure online. For example, if you're familiar with Azure or AWS, we can create a virtual machine in minutes, and instead of buying the physical hardware, actually we can access the storage databases online, scale resources as the traffic grows. We can scale with just a click of a button, and we only pay for what we use, meaning there is no capital expenditure. The cloud works on an OPEX model, that is, we are only going to pay for what we are going to use. Now, the examples to better understand cloud computing is just take an example of Gmail, right? What we have to do is just sign up, give the username, give the password, give other details, and just add. And after that, we can use the services from the Google. We can log into any drive. So we can use maps. We can use a lot of options available from Google Suite. That is a very basic and fundamental example of cloud computing in a way that you do not have to manage the underlying hardware from where that Gmail is being running that application. You just have to give a username and password, and that's it. You can just use the service. When we come to other applications, we have file storage, Dropbox, and Google Drive. Same as Gmail, we just give the username and password and we can just directly use their services. And the next, if you talk about the online applications, Facebook, Instagram, and Netflix, Amazon Prime, all comes under this model, right? We do not have to manage anything behind the scenes servers, so which powers the applications. Everything is managed by the provider. We just use their services, pay for the monthly cost, and that's it. The cloud platforms, we have the major cloud players like Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud. They have the most market share in the industry and is being widely used globally. Next we have is why cloud. If we already have a traditional IT infrastructure and is working pretty good, why we evolved to cloud? So to understand better this, we have to go back to the drawbacks that was the industries or the users were facing when they had their own infrastructure, traditional IT. So number one, the major impactful and the cost driven was we had to buy hardware, and it could cost thousands of dollars, and just to bring them over could take months for the companies. And other was the setting up data centers. So whenever you have the hardware, right, you have to have the place for them. So the company is required to have the specific section to keeping the hardware, the data centers, right? And for that to function, they had to have the power, the cooling, and maintenance, and a lot of other intrinsic things they had to manage. To summarize, the companies had to give up a lot of upfront cost, that is thousands of dollars, just to buy the hardware and to set up the all infrastructure on their side, and it would easily take a lot of time duration to set that up. For example, it can take around 2 to 3 months for this entire process, right? So these were the main drawbacks which were companies were facing, and they had to go through all these steps. Now, how cloud changed all this by offering so instant resource provisioning, meaning we can just directly go to our browser, and let's say I need a virtual machine to deploy my application. I can just log in, create a virtual machine, and run my application, and that's it. And next is no upfront investment. We do not have to pay any cost for the hardware or setting up the data centers or anything like that. In the cloud model, we just pay for what we use, and for the time duration that resources are getting used, we are only going to pay for that. Next is global availability. So what do you understand by global availability, right? Let's take an example of Microsoft Azure. So what Microsoft has done is they have set up their large data centers across the world globally. And what's the benefit of that is, let's take an example of Instagram. If my application is being popularly liked by a lot of people from India and I want to deploy that application to a different region, let's say Central America, so I can just deploy my application directly by logging into the cloud and use the region of the America continent and then just directly run my application there. And by that, our application will be globally available and end users can access that without any latency. The next being the faster innovation. So how quickly we can deploy our application and how fast we can scale corresponds to the how fast we can innovate with our application, because we will not be spending our time into like the traditional IT. We can quickly provision resources, access them, deploy them globally, and all of those nice and good features we get with cloud. And other benefit is we are only going to pay for what we use, and even if we need to remove the application, we can just delete the resources, and that's all. Now, next we have is a key characteristics of cloud. Number one being we have on-demand self-service. That is, we can create resources anytime without waiting. Next we have is a broad network access. That is, we can access it from anywhere using the internet. We just need to have the internet connection and a browser. Then we have is a resource pooling. So that means shared infrastructure. So cloud has a large data centers, and for each customer that comes up, they actually don't get their own piece of hardware. We can do that, but that will incur the more cost. And basically, our whatever virtual machines and the databases or whatever resources we have can run on the same hardware on which the other customers' resources are also running. So it's a shared infrastructure. And then we have is a rapid scalability. Rapid scalability just means that we can scale up or down within minutes. By taking an example of our application, if it is high in load, a lot of CPU memory is being consumed, we can automatically set up our resources to scale as the load increases and to scale down as well when the load decreases. We can go up to a lot of high number of CPU and the memories. There's no limit in cloud. So that is the benefit we can utilize from it as well. And the last, measured service. So each service, for example, we create like a virtual machines, we get charged for every hour. It's not like we have to pay the upfront cost. We just have to pay for the amount of time we are using that resource. So you only pay for what you use, and when we just remove the resources, the billing also stops. So these features make cloud flexible and very cost effective as well. Now, traditional IT versus cloud. So, when we talk about on premises, we had high capital cost as we just discussed, and then we had a long setup time, even months for some of the user. Then we had manual scaling, right? If the load increased, we have to do it manually. We can set up some automation there as well, but it's very flexible in the cloud. And then we had continuous maintenance, because once you have operating systems, we need to patch it, hardware on which the resources are running. And when the company is compared with cloud, cloud makes sense, because with the benefits we get, the cloud is just a lot. And then comes the cloud operational cost model. No hardware purchase, right? We just pay for what we use. Deployment in minutes. We can create a virtual machine, we can create a database. I'm just giving a basic examples, but there's a lot we can do at the cloud, even the AI and machine learning stuff. And we have easy scalability. Infrastructure is managed by the provider like Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud takes care of underlying hardware. They upgrade them, they maintain them, all of that. Cloud moves IT from a capital expense to a flexible operational expense. And just to add to this, just for a small business or the companies who are just starting out, cloud makes sense because we do not have to pay hefty amount in the hardware and setting up data centers. We can just run the business from the cloud, and it's basically very easy for the startups to start working on their projects, and they can just focus on their actual projects instead of focusing on traditional IT infrastructure. Now, next we have is a cloud service models overview. So cloud services are divided into three main models, that is IaaS, infrastructure as a service, and platform as a service, PaaS, and SaaS, software as a service. The main difference between them is how much you manage and how much the cloud provider manages. As you move from the IaaS to the SaaS, your responsibility decreases. Now let's go to IaaS to understand more. So in the IaaS, the cloud provider manages the physical hardware, but you manage the operating system, applications, and configuration. So in case of Azure virtual machines, which basically lets you deploy your virtual machines in Azure or AWS, we call it as a EC2. So what happens in them is we have to manage the operating system, right? Linux or Windows or Ubuntu or anything you have chosen, and the applications you are running on them and the configuration. But the cloud provider manages the physical servers, the underlying hardware where it is running, and the storage behind the scenes and the networking part also, right? So next we have is platform as a service. Basically, the layer of managing the operating system and the configuration is gone. You just need to manage your application code. For example, Azure App Service or AWS Elastic Beanstalk. We just deploy our code in these resources, and actually that's it. We do not have to manage OS, runtime, scaling, infrastructure. Everything is managed by cloud, and we just need to take care of our application code. And this can help you to focus on your application instead of thinking about OS patching and maintenance and all those kind of stuff. So we can get the benefit of just using PaaS so that we can just focus on our code. Next we have is a SaaS, and if you don't know, we have been using the SaaS version in our applications. Basically, you just simply use the software, no infrastructure or platform management required. Example is Netflix, Zoom, Slack, Dropbox, all are SaaS. You just use the application through a browser or app. This is the cloud model most people use daily without even realizing. So next we have is a deployment models. So as a company or a business, there are various deployment models we can use so that our infrastructure is deployed across. We do not have one source of our data center presence. So we have three deployment models. We can use the public cloud, private cloud, and the hybrid cloud. Public cloud, it is a shared infrastructure managed by the provider like AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. And it's a pay-as-you-go, highly scalable. Next, we have the private cloud. That is the company can have a dedicated infrastructure. It provides you more control and security. When you see more control and security, is because private cloud you own your hardware and it's not going to be in a shared environment, it's going to be in your own. Basically you control who access the data and where it goes, and not simply Azure, Google Cloud, etc. And this kind of model companies mostly uses when they want to have their own data centers and when they do not want to run their apps or infrastructure on other data centers. Next is hybrid cloud. Hybrid cloud is a combination of on-premises and the public cloud. In this basically the companies uses the both, that is the public cloud and the private cloud. This provides the companies benefit of a mix. So the data they want to keep in their own data centers can be kept at private cloud, and the public cloud they can keep the data which basically is not very confidential. Companies can sometimes use it for the purposes like disaster recovery scenarios as well. They can run their primary data center as in private cloud and the public cloud being the backup or a disaster recovery, right? Companies often keep sensitive data on premises and use cloud for scalability. And these were the three deployment models that the companies often use for their own infrastructure. Next we have is the benefits of cloud computing. So we get no upfront hardware cost, we can scale resources anytime, we have the faster deployment, reduced maintenance, and high availability and global reach. And the real world impact, today companies uses cloud to launch applications globally, handle sudden traffic increases, and improve reliability. Instead of worrying about infrastructure, teams can focus on building better products. And the key takeaway from this session is cloud computing is not just about servers, it's about speed we get and the flexibility, cost efficiency, and the ability to innovate faster. Now, to better understand this, how the data centers are spread across globally, we'll go to Azure regions page and see how many data centers we have. Let's take one cloud provider, Azure. So they have a very good 3D view. That is what we are going to see. So you can see how all those regions are spread across globally, and they are all connected by the networking, right? So you can also refer to this link. I'll attach that in the document. You can just see and understand how the all regions are connected, like what are availability zones, what are regions in the cloud, and what are the points of presence, all of that. So when we zoom in here, we can see In India, we have South India, then Central India, and you can see all of these are powers that are connecting all these regions together. And with this, the major benefit we get is we can deploy our applications globally. We can have our resources or our data present across different regions, so that in case suppose my data is in at South India and a disaster happens at this particular data center, my data, if I already copied it into, let's say, South Africa, my data will be available from there. So this is the kind of benefit we get from the cloud, because this kind of flexibility and scaling can only be provided if you have this massive scale of infrastructure. So if you're starting your cloud journey, understanding these basics is the first step. Understanding this will help you understanding the crux of the whys and the hows. That is how cloud helps. So give a like and subscribe if you like this video, and we'll meet you in the next one. Thank you.